and then going into the 4 steps. The 4 steps are very simple. The first one is identify what you want. So easy. How many times do you know what you want? At least you may know what you don't want. So maybe it starts there. But get to what it is that you want. Okay. The second step is what? Yeah, identify someone who wants what you want. You know, so it's like I hate my job. Who else do I know that hates their job? I mean, it's like how do I find just one person who hates their job? But find someone who hates their job and that's looking for a new job, right? What's the third thing? Yeah, so you help them. So you actually spend time helping that person get what they want, like actively. But you can also do it in the meditation state too. It doesn't always have to be physical. I think doing it mentally is great. If you actually are doing this practice and you are helping somebody get what they want during your meditation phase, you can actually review what you did do, or you can even contemplate what you will do tomorrow. So that's a really nice thing. And what's the fourth one? Mm-hmm. So, rejoicing and dedicating. I've had very high lamas. I shouldn't say lama. I've had one high lama say before, and I've said this before in classes. The main reason he would say that we are all so unhappy in our life is because we don't rejoice enough. It's basically because you are actually all very, very good at meditating, to be honest. Like you're all excellent at it. You just meditate on the wrong things. You just meditate on what sucks in life mostly, or what you're not getting, or how you're afflicted and you're upset at somebody or something, or or impatient, or whatever narratives that we all have, right? So one thing that Geshe Michael talks about, other teachers in this lineage, and actually in other lineage of Tibetan Buddhism will speak about, and one thing I will reiterate again and again and again, and it's so simple and yet incredibly difficult for those of you who practice, but it's actually to end your evening every night dedicating. You dedicate and you rejoice. So it means that you think about the effort that you did that was good, and you dedicate it to that person or somebody out there, and you rejoice in what you've done. Most of the times we usually go to bed thinking like, I don't know, maybe it's usually I don't want to think. So you just want to shut down and not even consider what's happening in your life because you're over it. Or you go to bed thinking, there's so much I still have to do. Or you might go to bed just, going through a rewind of your life and all the things that you don't want. Sometimes you might but you go to bed rejoicing. Like you think, God, I was amazing today when I decided to help my friend figure out how on earth to format her Word document. You don't really spend time rejoicing and giving yourself credit for what you do. You usually spend more time thinking about what you haven't done, or where you are deficient, or maybe where other people, or even, even a step from that is even where other people have not met certain type of requirements or expectations that you wanted, right? And so those are the 4 steps. We can do it again next time, but I just wanted to walk you guys through that as a reminder, okay? Yes, yeah, please.
Can you do that for like more than one thing at a time?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can totally do that for more than one thing at a time. You mean like more than one topics?
Yeah, like let's say it's like I hate my job and like I want to start traveling or something. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like smaller thing, like
Yes.
smaller things.
But you can also do things where you can, I mean, it just depends on how strategic you are, but you can clump it together. It's like, I hate my job and I want a job where it's something I really am passionate about. It's something like that, right? For instance, or it might be, and I know that travel is something I'm passionate about. And so I'm trying to figure out a way how to, so it doesn't have to be so literal, like in that sense. But it should be like something similar in the sense of, I hate my job, I need to find a new job. And you don't want to find someone who's like, I really hate my partner, I need to find a new partner, because the tactics are different, the strategies are different. So you want someone that's going to align, but you can't have multiple different um, objectives that you're looking for. Sure.
And does it have to be like, do you pick one person, or like, let's say you're like, I want a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and you like, there are just a few friends in your life who are looking.
Yeah.
Can you help all of them, or you have to like pick one?
Totally. You can help all of them. I find that in my personal experience, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and say probably from how Geshe Michael has taught it too, it's more effective when it's focused on one person because they move. You can see the progression. When you start helping multiple people, it still is something, but there's something about the charge of really like dedicating it to one. Like there's a focus with that one person. You will follow up, you will spend the time. The question really is, can you really effectively help 4 or 5 people consistently? If you can, do it, absolutely. If there's a mechanism in place where you have that ability, absolutely. If you don't, just keep it focused on one, just so that there's the follow through, you know?
And what if, for example, what if you hate your job
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and you have started a project with someone who, after learning this meditation, you realize would be the perfect person to help?
Yeah.
That's okay, even if you're working together.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, you might be, this is like really bizarre, but you could be in situations where you don't want to be in the relationship you're in and your partner feels that way and you want to help each other figure out a way out. I mean, sure, of course. I mean, if your incentive, and the reason I'm assuming you're asking that is because you're starting a project at a company. And so you're wondering if it's a conflict of interest, right?
No, it was like if you have a friend
Mm-hmm.
and you both hate your job situation, it's like, okay, let's try doing something together.
Yeah.
Because I also have an interest tied to this project.
Yeah.
Does it not count if I'm helping her figure out her stuff? Because I would benefit too.
No, it would, as long as your intention is clear of why you're doing it and however it manifests, it doesn't really matter,
Okay.
technically. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I do things where I use other mediums as a platform to help people, but it's not really the point. Like I don't really care if they finish that or not. There's other objectives that need to be in place for things to move forward. You know? Does that make sense? Okay. Um, I highly recommend this practice, by the way, if you guys are beginners or even not, quite frankly. It is fascinating to watch and to see how your lives shift and change. It is something where I have found personally that things move quicker um, in my life and I learn more, and people around me also stop complaining, which is also really nice. Like there's so many good things about it, and and it does require effort, but it's also nice to just not think about yourself for a little bit every day. You know, it's just a very basic principle, right? And you're doing it out of a place where you're not doing, I mean, most importantly for me, this is one of my triggers. Like I tend to do things out of obligation or guilt. Um, and so I have to make sure when I am helping someone that I'm not mixing my intentions out of obligation. Like I'm very clear of I'm doing it because I want to. You know, I had a girlfriend call me yesterday and her partner just had a premature baby. So partner, and it was or a gay couple. It was really difficult for her to get the wife to get impregnated. They have this, you know, all this stuff going on. And she called me out of the blue. My schedule is busy. She said, do you think that are you in Chinatown ever? Do you think you can drop by and pick up some herbs and drop it off at my office? Because I want to cook my wife some soup tonight. And I said, well, actually, it's so funny. I am going to be around Chinatown today at 9:30, so I'll totally pick it up and drop it off to you. And it ended up taking a lot longer in my day than I thought, but it was actually really lovely and nice to be able to just not have a day where I'm scrambling all morning with my emails and calls and meetings, but to just say, you know what, I just need to leave and step out of the office for 2 hours. And this is something I want to do and can do. and to be able to dedicate that, right? And it was also really lovely to be able to have the opportunity to be able to give, because it's also sometimes for some it's difficult to ask, right? So there was a nice thing that happens. So if you have the opportunity, or if you can create the opportunity, please do that for yourself. It is one of the best practices and most basic ways to, I think, to practice. And it doesn't even have to be in like a secular type of, I mean, it's like a very secular type of way of even thinking of it. It's not a religious type of thing. I don't think of it even that way. Okay, so my name is Jee. Welcome to ACI. Actually, it's called the Foundation Courses. It's course 4. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what these courses are. The courses were created by Geshe Michael Roach in 1996, and he taught the 18 courses in its entirety. I think it took him about 6 years. It usually takes about 5 to 6 years to finish the courses. He created the curriculum based on his Geshe degree that he got in Saramay Monastery in India. He was the first Western Geshe to come to the US and to create this curriculum. In the past, in monasteries, the way that curriculums are, it's you kind of get it where you can, and it's not structured so linearly. And so, you know, wherever a teacher is teaching something, there's certain curriculums, but it's not necessarily done in a way that is systematic and easy for Westerners to understand. So what Geshe Michael did is he created these courses where it's subject-based, and each subject within each course has 10 courses, and it's divided up where it's fairly digestible to the best degree. I've been studying Tibetan Buddhism now for, I don't know, I think it's like 10 or 12 years, which is really scary. And I still find that when I am listening to this content or teaching it, it's always very new to me in different ways. I'm always learning something. So I don't think you can really ever hear it enough. And quite frankly, I have found in my experience, and maybe that's just because I'm really dense, but I have to hear it probably 1,000 times until I can kind of even get some of the concepts. It takes a while. So if you're confused, that's okay. Join the rest of us. If you're not, even better, teach us and lead. And that's where the way these courses have been. They're generally about 12 weeks in total. I think this course might be a little bit longer. I'm going to do the courses slightly different, I think. And we'll test it out and see. There are your kind of basic things that we'll have. I'll have an email list that will go around during our break. And the email list is really just so that I have your contact. I send out any updates that are going on, any type of material, course material that you're interested in using. So readings, there are homeworks and quizzes, and there is a final. You don't have to participate in any of it. I recommend for you to try if you can. But for those of you who do finish homeworks and quizzes and finals, it goes to the main institution in Arizona. They keep record, and then you get like a certificate for each course that you finish. And for those of you who have done the first 3 courses or other courses, if you're interested in getting it, you can still go back after you finish courses and still get your certificate if you're interested. So that's kind of just like the shop talk stuff. I usually give a disclaimer, as do all my other teachers, that I am here to teach what I know. What I don't know, I try to be as clear as possible about what I don't know and what research I need to find. I by no means have understand all this content to its depth and entirety. I'm still learning as well, just like you. I'm very adamant about being a practitioner of the world, which you will probably realize sooner than later, which means that I find it my responsibility to be able to be a practitioner of Buddhist philosophy, but also a woman of the world. And meaning I work in the world, in the workplace. I have a company I run. I have employees. I have the same stresses and struggles that I have a husband, although he doesn't create that much stress and struggle in my life. But I have family, you know, so I don't think that Buddhist philosophy should be something or is necessarily meant for just being a monastic by no means. I think it can be done and accomplished in an urban contemporary world. I think that there are struggles that we have being in a setting like that, but I also think there are settings when you are a monk or a nun as well. So we'll get to kind of work through those together as a group. Um, what else? What else? Prostrations, just going back. When we prostrate, just so you understand, there's something that I'm doing with my hands. You're putting your hands in a prayer form, and technically your thumb is tucked inside of your hand when you prostrate. It's really a symbol. It means it's like a jewel, it's precious. It's just basically symbolizing something precious. And we prostrate, and there's three areas it's at the head, the mouth, and the heart. So it symbolizes body, speech, and mind. And that's what you're saying when you see that. I am going to ask everybody in this course to attempt to meditate, and I'm going to be asking everyone to keep a meditation journal that I will have you submit, and it can be on a piece of paper or on a nice fancy journal, whatever you want, but I will be taking a look at that and keeping record. I'm very particular about making sure that we all accomplish something. I'm not really that interested in us coming and learning Tibetan Buddhism and then going out into the world and doing nothing about it. You're all here for whatever reason. I don't know what that is that's specific to your story, but I suspect it has something to do with concepts of enlightenment or just making you happy, which to me, they're pretty synonymous. Um, so I will be requiring everyone to do some meditations, and we will work on that together. Okay. Are there any questions anyone has? Okay. Another just quick kind of background about my history. I started these courses probably about 8, 9 years ago with my teacher, John Stillwell, who's a senior teacher of Geshe Michael Roach. He did the entire 18 courses, which I, like you, sat in a class for, I think it took him 7 years to finish, and did that. My practice comes from the Galupa lineage, which is what we're in currently. So the scriptures teachings that we're doing and this lineage that we're studying in this organization is called the Galupa lineage, which is the same lineage if you trace it back to the Dalai Lama. So it ends up being kind of culturally very list heavy, which you'll realize. The Galupa is a great and a wonderful place to, I think, learn the foundations and the fundamentals of Buddhism. If you're interested in other philosophies or other lineages, I have heard from other teachers like Galupa is a great place to start. It's a good place to even understand just general vocabulary and concepts. So I've been in this lineage since I first started my practice. I also study in what's called the Sakya lineage, and I also draw, every once in a while you hear me refer things from the yoga lineages. And my yoga practice has been primarily in the Ashtanga world, okay? So that's my background for those of you that want to know or are interested. Okay, all right, here we go. So we're going to be studying about the future, about proof of future lives. I guess I just want generally to understand, are you in this class because that specifically is interest to you? Or are there other aspects that you're curious about so that I have a better understanding? Like, how many of you come to this class and you're like, gee, I'm really interested in knowing about future lives and past lives? Like, that is something that has been a big block for me. And if I understood it, I feel like I'm closer to enlightenment, or I'll meditate better, or this whole Buddhist thing will make more sense. Kind of. Yes. Okay. The rest of you are like, I don't know, just checking it out for the first time. Okay. Okay. All right. So, or the second time. Okay. I'm just going to be like totally transparent. When I took this course, I was not Buddhist and I did not care about future lives. I just wanted to get happy. I was like, I don't know what it is. I will sit in this course, but I remember, you know, I did the courses 1, 2, and 3. In course 4, I think I don't know, I came because there was other stuff that was being taught, but future lives was not a really big sticking point for me. Like, I don't think I can consider future life because I couldn't even consider my own life. Like, that was too much in advance, right? Like, thinking about what I was trying to do to get out of the situation I was in at that time in my life, and my current life was already difficult enough. So I wasn't really motivated about future lives at that point. If you are, amazing. If you're not, it's totally okay. I've been there. Um, so the first thing we're going to start with is the definition of sema. Can we all say sema? Sema. Again, sema? Sema. Okay. So sema means valid perception. The Sanskrit is pramana. Okay. A valid perception, the definition of what's valid perception, or sometimes you hear it as correct perception, is basically a perception that's it's a normal, unaffected perception. Okay, unaffected. So usually when some perception's unaffected, it means there's no external factors that's affecting your perception. It usually means you're not intoxicated. It means that you're not drugged, or there's just no, I don't know, you're not having your PMS. I don't know. There's like so many things, like your hormones aren't out of whack. You clearly know that you're, to the best of your ability, you know that you're not, your mind is not affected. Okay. So sema is valid perception, which means it's a perception that is unaffected, in the unaffected state of mind. Okay. Um, and it's important, and we're going to start with this because you make semas or pramanas or valid perceptions every day. You have valid perceptions every day. Do we agree with that? Okay. The thing that's so interesting about valid perceptions is that your valid perceptions that you make every day, moment to moment, reinstates your reality every day. Does that sound true? Yeah, right? Okay. And so it validates the way in which you exist, the way in which you relate to the world, the way you perceive everything, the way you look at good and bad. It's all created by your valid perceptions. Yeah, we're okay with that. Everyone's okay with that. Okay. So then I'm going to say the next step is, if that's true, then every pramana, every sema, every valid perception that you have, you're basically creating your world. Is that true? Okay, great. So I'm going to have you just sit on that, because if that's actually it's an incredibly profound concept that we're going to skim a little bit and go deeper into in this course. Okay. All right. So the definition of pramana or valid perception is same. Can we say sema, mikpa, yupe, seni? Again, sema, mikpa, yupe, seni. That's Tibetan for those of you. I mean, that's not Tibetan. It's the not the trans. It's not it's the transliteration. Mm-hmm. So sema means via pramana. Mikpa means perceived. Yupe means of existence, and seni means definition. So in Tibetan, like in most Asian languages, it moves. I think Mexican, Spanish as well does this. Like I think Mexican, Spanish. Sorry, they usually go backwards. So what you're seeing is the definition of existence, which is perceived by pramana, which I kind of gave you an abbreviated definition, which is that which is perceived by an unaffected perception. So that's the definition of pramana. Okay. So it's, for instance, like, I don't know, I see pink roses, right? And therefore these roses exist for me, right? Like I'm not on drugs and I'm not affected. My mind isn't. So to me, it's like there's a vase here, there are flowers. I see them, I've labeled them as roses, and therefore this vase of roses is my reality, right? This is my world that I'm seeing. True? True, right? We're okay with that, right? Yes.
Just a question. Mm-hmm. So how is this idea? It sounds really similar to correct view. Mm-hmm. Is it the same thing? Mm-mm. Okay, then maybe I'm confused.
What's correct view?
Correct view is the idea about where things in our world are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about developing correct view, but you don't have to develop pramana.
No, you already have it. You actually already have it. You don't develop pramana. That's a very good point. You already have valid perception. Like you didn't develop how to have a valid perception growing up. You have certain valid perceptions based on your karma as a human. Like your valid perception is going to be different than a dog's valid perception, but they're both valid perceptions, right? It's just the concept that there's a perception that's happening, right? So, and I'm bringing this up and we're going to start going into it because everything in Tibetan Buddhism, especially this course, is based on logic and theories of logic. And so the idea here is that you don't have to develop pramana. You already have it. You have it all the time. And the fact is that your pramana is what creates how you see how things exist and therefore creates how you experience and see your world. Okay, based on your valid perception. That's like.
So perhaps our pramanas are creating the world around us, which is actually hindering correct view.
Totally. Yes. Of course. Yeah. Yeah. And that's why this topic is so important. Because even understanding the basic understanding what unaffected perception is, what pramana is the foundation of what, it's not the foundation, it's like one of the foundational elements of what Buddhism is all about. It's crazy. So we'll go into it. I really get so excited about it. I was like, oh my God, corrected. I was like, we're going to be talking about valid perception today. It's awesome. Okay. And you'll get it once I get there. You'll be like, why is this woman so excited by valid perception? So if you have valid perceptions that validate your existence every day, can you take refuge in something you don't perceive? So what's refuge? It's like an escape in a way, kind of, right? Like refuge can be escape. What are you escaping from though? Like usually you take refuge and if you're taking refuge in something or what do you, right. So there's usually a fear component, right? Something is going wrong, you're afraid and you're going to refuge because you're afraid of something and that thing has some sense of what? Safety of some sort, right? So there are these three basic principles of Tibetan Buddhism that we always talk about. Okay, the first one is what? Renunciation. The second one is bodhicitta, and the third one is, okay, so I'm going to just break this down very simply for everybody. The first one, when we say there's three principles of Tibetan Buddhism, the first one is renunciation. And what renunciation means, it means that you're realizing that you're not going to reach happiness or enlightenment on your own. That there is a sense of giving up and surrendering certain aspects of the way in which you think in order to obtain a higher level of living. Okay? Does that make sense? Well, okay. The second one is what's called bodhicitta, which we use a lot, or you sometimes hear the word bodhi, B-O-D-H-I, like in, I don't know, I always think like in hippie stores, I see like bodhi something. But anyway, so bodhicitta basically means that you're living your life not just to save yourself, but also to help other beings too. It's not just a me thing, it's a we thing, right? And the third thing is correct view, or well, we'll say correct view, right? And correct view is the concept that everything comes from you, not at you. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tie what pramana means to correct view so that you can understand the relationship of the two. Okay. So, no, the pen is always such a better example. Does someone have a pen? Thank you. Okay. It's like, Okay, so so here's how this goes. This is how we do it in this lineage. So we'll keep it going. Oh yeah, this one. Oh yeah, the 3 Jules pens. Is this a pen? Okay, what is this? It's a pen, right? It's a pen. And you're sure it's a pen? Yeah. Okay. And you in your unaffective mental state, you all agree that this is pen. Yeah. Okay. If a dog came in the room, what would the dog think this was? It's some sort of toy, right? Something to chew on. So is it a pen or is it a chew toy? It depends on who's perceiving it, because they're both valid perceptions, unless your dog is drunk. But assuming your dog's not drunk, right? They're both valid perceptions, right? 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 We agree to that. So what that means then is that they're both correct. It just depends on your perception. And what that also means is that if indeed this pen was self-existent, meaning it existed on its own side, it was inherently pen on its own, then it would, from its own side, be able to project onto you pen, pen, pen. And everyone that would ever experience and be around this object would know this is a pen. But that's not how it works, because your projections don't come this way. It doesn't come at you. It actually comes from you. It's based on what you're projecting onto this object. That's why you have a guy that comes in, and you can have between you and other girlfriends, right? Or you can have a woman come in, and you could have me come, let's use me. You can have me come in and sit. And there are multiple perceptions or projections of who I am to each and one of you, right? Some of you would be like, wow, that woman looks really old. Or some of you like, that woman looks way too young. Or it's like, I like her hair. I don't like her hair. She's this. I mean, they're all valid, right? I mean, I might have a different opinion. I'd be like, I'm really not that old or whatever, right? But there's a different opinion that I have. So what that means is that if you can understand that the world doesn't come at you, but it comes from you, then when shitty things happen, where is that coming from? Yeah. It's like, no, seriously, it is, right? It sucks, but it's so true. Yeah. Because if that logic follows, then when you see your boss who you really don't like, where do you think that's coming from? Because is he a douche to everyone? Or is she a douche to everyone? Right? And so this idea of unaffective perception or pramana, the reason why it's so profound is that when you start to think and consider that your valid perceptions, you decide to stack them together in whichever order you want, whichever framework you want, to then decide that you're going to create that and say, that is reality and actual and does not change. It's unchanging. And that's just not true, because everyone else has a perception and projection that is also true to them. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? No, not really. You're not getting it. It means that you're not wasted. Like you're a totally like sober, unaffected. Huh? Yeah, great. So when you have, that's a great example. So when you have certain type of mental illnesses, I mean, literally, like it depends on what state of depression. Like there's a difference of I just had a really moody day and a bad day and it's my hormones, or there are actual mental illnesses that you may have. Then at that point, it does become It's like, what does effective mean? It means that because you know that when you're depressed, you also know when you're not depressed. So when you're depressed, it's an effective state of mind. Like, how many of you in moments of acute or deep depression have made decisions that you come out of your depression, you're like, maybe that was not a good idea. Maybe calling and leaving 10 voicemails was not a good idea, right? And I wasn't drunk. I was just enraged, or really upset or really hurt, right? So I know that my mind was affected at that moment, because when I come out of it, I'm like, oh, that is not what an even keeled person would have done, right? So assuming that your mind is not affected, it is in the most stable sense that you can see it, that when you see the world, right? When you see this pen, right? You understand that you are seeing it as a pen, but not everybody in the world is seeing it that way. That makes sense?
I think to that, it also there's an element of agreement, right? Like, for example, dogs, all dogs, or most people, 90% dogs would agree that that is something.
Totally.
Whereas for humans, most people would see that as a pet.
Totally.
And so that's where the unaffected state of mind would come from. Like, if somebody was mentally ill,
Mm-hmm.
disabled in some way, and they couldn't see that as something, and because amongst humans that there's an agreement that that is a pen. This one person, you couldn't see it as a pen because of their disability. That can be classified as a affected. Like somebody who's drunk.
I'm not going to agree with that, because I think about situations where you have beings who have had some realities or realizations, and they can see things that I can't see. And there aren't that many people that can see it either in the world. Do you know what I mean? And it's not agreed upon that those things are in fact true, because there are only 1% of the world that could actually see what these people see. I don't think it's
I meant in terms of whether you could say something is
affected or not.
Yeah, like I feel like what.
But but the reason I don't know if that's, I haven't heard anything about mass, like the mass number of people, the general understanding. I think that in debate there are certain steps, right, and how logic falls, but I don't think that what is agreed upon, like if you have a unanimous vote of perception, then it's not necessarily true, right? Like unanimously, if you took a poll, right, and most people believed in, I don't know, right, that Trump is a great president, right? It's not what's unanimous and at what point and in what degree,
They're all still valid perceptions.
They're all valid. Yeah.
So whether you're in an affected state and you see, or you can use a pen to stab somebody too, because you're in an affected state. It's still a pen in your valid perception. It's still a pen to everybody who sees it as a pen. But at the moment, you may not be seeing it as a pen.
Right.
But it's still, I guess it's still valid in that moment, because grabbing it and using it for some other purpose.
Technically, if your mind is affected, it's not valid.
So somebody's enraged.
So yeah, so it would be.
Yeah.
For instance, what happens is, for instance, the person that I'm talking to might say, like, you're a liar, you're a liar.
Yes.
Whereas actually, I'm not the one who's lying, but she or he
Yes.
is a constant liar.
Yes.
And he or she is kind of mirror projecting.
Yes.
I am
Yes.
the one who is lying.
Yes.
That kind of things happen all the time.
All the time.
Is it me who is triggering?
Yes.
For he or she to be
Yes.
a liar?
Yes. Okay, that's a great question. Okay. So you have person A and person B. Person A is saying, you're a liar, you're a liar. And this person, which let's say be you, be like, I'm not lying. Are you like, what are you talking about? So in that situation, right, this person, okay, assuming that they both have valid, they're not unaffected states, right? This person who's seeing this person as a liar, that perception is valid. And this person who's saying, I have no idea what you're talking about, I didn't lie, that's also valid, because they're both projecting things onto each other. The thing is, though, is that you're seeing this person as not as being whatever you're labeling this person as based on your projection. Does that make sense? What this is about is not a perception conversation. It's that what happens is when we see projections, when we use our promenades, is that what we end up doing is we end up crystallizing a concept and making it self-existent. That's the thing. That's the point, right? So like you look at your neighbor or your boss who you can't stand, and you have decided to label the bad boss as the bad boss. It is an absolute, it is static, and it's not negotiable. And you know what? Even further, it's a fact for you. You've actually made it become a fact. And that's not true. It's not true. And that's just like a really obvious one, I think. There are more subtle things like your body, you know, it's like you make judgments on your body or other people or the way that life should be or the way that life needs to be. Or I was just recently having a conversation with someone who is feeling really bummed out about how, you know, she's trying to have a creative life and explore a different way. And she was hanging out with all her finance friends. She didn't mean to, but she was. And they made her feel really bad about herself. And she just felt like maybe I am really lost, you know, like maybe I should, like, shouldn't a proper normal person who's living their life a certain way go through a certain process of living and making money and making income, you know? So we create these realities in our life that have become actual based on our perception, our valid perceptions, and we think that's the only way things can exist. It puts you in a box, and then you wonder, why the hell am I in a box? You know, it's like really obvious, right? Me growing up, it was always like, gee, when you get older, you need to marry a Korean man because you're Korean, and that's what we do. And that is a way in which a good girl is defined. And that's totally valid for my family, totally, right? But that became something that was then taught, you know, that was conditioned, that then became a fact for me for a long time until I had to decide whether or not I was, it's like, oh my God, the world isn't square. Like I didn't fall off. It could actually be something that is completely not what I thought it was. And so this idea of correct view and promenade is so fascinating and so profound, because if you start to really think about who's really responsible for the life that you have, based on these philosophies, it's you. Like all the good comes from you and all the bad comes from you. And so, but what's even, and I could just end there and be like, that sucks. Good luck, you guys. Have a nice week, you know? But what's actually even cooler is that it means that it empowers you to make that change, that you can shift the world in which you live in completely. And I'm not even joking about it. You can completely radicalize your life in a completely different way. You can even look the same and completely change the way that the world looks like to you. You know, how many times have you stepped out into New York and you're like, oh my God, I love this city. It's so amazing to live here. And then like the next day, you're like, this city sucks. It's the worst. It smells like urine. There's rats everywhere. Why the hell I can't even hear half the things I think about because it's so loud, right? Both valid and both true, right? But in that moment when we say it's good, we just create this whole fabrication like it is fact, right? And then when it gets bad, we think, oh, what happened? It's like you have that partner, you're like, this partner is amazing. They're like the perfect person I have in my life and I'm so in love. And then what happens? They end up sucking, of course, right? Or the job, it's like the amazing job and then it sucks. Or the apartment. How many times have you moved from a crap apartment to a better one and you're like, this is amazing. And then a year or two later, you're like, this sucks. It happens all the time. And it's because we think in a strange way that the world comes at us. Like you think the world comes at you. You think that you just, most of us think that we experience life and you didn't have a choice. And it's like, well, that's what happened, and that's what happened, and we just react. All we do is we react constantly to all the stuff that's happening instead of getting behind it and realizing you actually have the ability to shift and change it. Like you're driving your car to wherever you want to go. You can do the Tesla thing and go to Mars if you wanted to. Yes. Yes. Who? You mean?
I was just trying to go back to the unaffected perception.
Mm-hmm.
So then, if it's not an agreed upon thing that somebody's perception is affected or unaffected, then is it a personal? Like I can say, like you were giving an example before, where I was raped and I came out of it and I noticed it was personal.
Yeah. Yeah.
But two people could be having an argument, and one person could be talking to the person saying, you are obviously angry and rage. The other person can be saying, no, I'm not angry, or I'm not rage. That's just me, or that's just what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So my point is, the reason why I brought up the affected or unaffected, and or the agreement portion of it,
Mm-hmm.
is who's to say somebody is affected or unaffected, except if it was the person themselves.
Of course.
And
Totally.
if that's the case, there has to be an agreement as to what an affected.
Sure.
People can
Yes.
agree that person is drunk or that person
Of course.
is
Yes. Of course. Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Of course. Sure. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, you know whether you are or you aren't.
But that's my question.
Mhm.
Is the perceived by an unaffected perception,
Mhm.
is that saying it's up to you to say I am affected or unaffected, or is there an agreement component of it
Mm-hmm.
that we can agree that this person
Yeah.
is affected or is unaffected?
Right.
So they are having a valid perception, or they're not having.
Sure. Sure. I mean, it depends on which context. Like if you're debating, there is an agreement, right? There has to be levels of agreement in a debate of, so Tibetan Buddhists, there's debates that, and we'll go through kind of steps of logic, and there's very specific formulas, but based on the logic, you would have to have agreements to get through each step. So that makes sense, right? But ultimately, the fact is that I can't read your mind, neither can you read mine. So it is a personal accountability where you have to be able to know. Like I could be wasted and say, I'm not affected, I'm fine, and I have to, at the end of the day, when I wake up from my affected state, I have to also realize that I'm not. It does take a certain level of self-awareness. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So would it be the only time that it really matters is when you get into somebody else's space or you're hurting somebody, that perception really matters? Because if not, we can agree to disagree
Totally.
about anything.
Of course.
And the only time that it matters,
Yeah,
that would be somebody's space, whether it's
No, unless you're harming yourself.
Yeah, unless you're harming yourself. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think how we define matters can be a whole discussion on its own, but of course you can agree to disagree. There is, and what you decide to agree on, what you don't, is based on every situation and circumstance. I mean, this idea of pramana isn't for you to use it as ammo to be like, I'm not having an argument with you because you have no pramana, and you're like, it's not like don't do that. Don't go home and use it as like ammo. I've seen couples do that. That's why I say it. I'm not even joking. It's like, but the main point of it is really to start to understand the basics of how your perceptions that you have, your unaffected perceptions that you have, start to build your reality that you created around you. It creates the construct of which you live in. Your perceptions creates that construct. Your perceptions creates joy, happiness, misery, all that. Like it does that all, And so it changes the conversation quite a bit, actually, and it has for me drastically, because now when I have a bad day with someone or some situation, the blame doesn't go out there as much, and it can't go out there. It can only go so far, because at the end of the day, I'm responsible for what I see. Why you see it, that's a whole different topic. And that has to do with karma. And so, but the fact is that I am responsible for what I see. And there are certain things, okay, so I'll slide into karma a little bit. There are certain things you can't, how many times do you have a thought that's rising in your mind and you want to stop it and you can't stop it? Like you can't stop thoughts. I wish you could, but you can't. I mean, I don't know if you've tried, but you can't. Like how many times are you thinking, I'm not going to be pissed. I'm not going to be pissed. I promise I'm staying calm. I'm like doing chants. I'm going to stay calm. No problem. I got this. You walk into that door and then she opens her mouth and you're totally screwed. And it's just the whole game went out the window. Like how many times has that happened to you in your life? And you try, you like had an agenda. So you can't, there are what's called, it really is karmas is what it is. It's forced is what we call it. We say karma is forced upon you to think a certain way. There are certain karmas that you have. There are certain karmas that you have as humans that are forced upon you to think a certain way. You just are. That's why we all have shared karmas as humans. Animals in the animal kingdom have their shared karmas that they have. So there are different type of karmas that are forced upon you. The good that you see are also based on your karmas, and the bad that you see are also based on your karmas. Because karma, simplified version, is what goes around comes around. What that really means is when you act good, you experience good. When you act poorly, you experience bad behavior. So that boss that's screaming at you, you can probably sit there and be like, when was the last time I screamed at somebody and was not considerate of their feelings at all? You're like, oh yeah, last Thursday, totally. I mean, it's that kind of cycle that happens. And so when you start to really understand and practice these concepts and start to look at how it applies and see where it works and where it doesn't work for you, which is always fascinating, I find, then it changes the way in which you exist and the way you live, and it deepens your practice because the level of accountability increases exponentially. And then the question really becomes, what do I need to do and what do I need to change what's happening out here? Because now I know what I don't like out here. So something has to happen in here for this to change. Because if the world comes from like this, not like this, right? But if it goes like this, then what are the things that I need to start practicing and fine tuning and eliminating out of my life to change the world that I live in? Yeah. Yes.
My question is about the like projection and us creating our world. Like, let's go with that. But my question is like, what do we do when? How do I say this? It's like I understand that I'm projecting something, but also like you can't make something what it's not. So like maybe I'm looking at these roses and I see white and pink, but someone else, their eyes like filter light differently and they see like coral and baby pink or something like that. But like
you can't change is what you're saying.
Yeah. And so I think my question is like, when you accept that these things are coming from you, what do you do with that information? Like, let's say it's a partner and you've been together for like a year, and at first things were great, but now you've been together for a year and they've changed, but they're still themselves. And it's just that now, like, you're seeing things that you didn't see before. There's a pattern, right, of like, oh, now I don't like this person, I need a new partner. But that's not the issue. It's like, or that is part of the issue, but also the issue is like, for real, like maybe this person isn't for you.
Right.
And you're starting to see those things.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
What do we do with this
information? Yeah. So now you're like, great. Now you're telling me, gee, the world comes for me. What do I do with that? Yeah. Like, how do I start to begin changing my world? Right. Okay, I'll say a brief version of it, and then probably over the next, I don't know, it's going to take over the next, this course in particular, but also the other courses that we have, I'll add to it. It's not a simple answer. Like I could give you like a really simple, you just need to practice the 6 perfections and that will be fine. And you're going to have to tackle at every single aspect that you can. And that has to do with your mental state, your world of how you work, how you practice meditation and why that's so important, what you're doing with your yoga. I mean, there's so many different aspects of it. It's not like an acute, this is one thing and that's how you change it. But what does make a difference when you start to realize that the world comes from you and you have things. Okay, so I'm going to give an example and I'm going to answer yours again, okay? You know, when you try to work out and you're like, okay, I just want my abs to look really good. Have you thought like, you know, like I just want my abs to like look really good. But you're not like thinking about the rest of your body. Like there's that like target workout thing that everyone thinks works. And so how many times have you seen someone who has like awesome abs and everything else is just like, you know, fluffy? Right? It doesn't work that way. You can't like target. And so I only bring this up because I remember when I was taking these courses, I'd be like talking to my teacher, I'm like, can you help me change my partner? I really don't like him. Like I really don't like him and I need for him to be nicer. And I probably would admit that I went to court classes most of the time to try to figure out tactics of finding a way to change my partner. And what ends up happening actually is that it ends up just being bigger than that because you realize that just like the ab thing, it's like you realize that it's not just an ab thing. It has to do with what you're drinking or what you shouldn't be drinking, what your diet looks like, how many times are you exercising, are you sleeping properly, is stress affecting the way that you put on weight, are you drinking enough water, right? There's so many elements to it. And so my short answer really is that there are so many elements to that process. It is going to be, and it does feel like you're doing all of it for quite some time until it just doesn't feel that hard anymore because things start to change. There's also, the thing is that karmas run out as well. So for instance, how many times have you had someone in your life where you're just totally annoyed by that person? And then like a couple years later, you're like the best friends, right? Karmas shift, or vice versa, right? You have someone that you've never been annoyed with, or just like your closest friend or your wonderful partner, and that also runs out too. So karmas do run out. If there are bad things that are going on in your life that are difficult and trying, there are ways to be able to just, there's a patience game that has to happen where things do need to be running out. There's also a point where you simultaneously plant those seeds for the future that you want. You know, the thing is that what you're experiencing now in your life, you can't change that trajectory because that's already been planted in your past. Does that make sense? Karmas, they ripen in a delayed process. So let's say I decided to give you money today because you said, hey, Jee, I'm really struggling and I would, you know, I'm trying to figure out a way to just buy groceries this month. Can you give me 500 bucks? You know, I give you $500, right? Me giving $500, dedicating, that's a karma, me giving her money, right? At some point, according to Buddhist philosophy, I will also get that money back. Karmas also increase as they get older. So if I give money, I will get money back at some point. If I'm kind to someone, someone will be kind to me again at some point. That's why when you have acts, that's why it's so messed up when you're acting nice to someone and they're mean to you. And you're like, what? That makes no sense. Why are you mean to me? I was nice to you. What the hell is your problem? Right? And the reason why that happens is because my action of being good to you has nothing to do with how you responded to me. How you responded to me has to do with a response that I had done in the past that happened to ripen in that moment. And that's why you can like, that's why there's only so much you can actually plan and expect out of your life. The example I always give is calling my mom. I always call my mom and I'm like, hi mom, how are you doing today? Depending on, I don't even know, I can't even predict it anymore. And some days she's super nice. Some days she's like, oh my God, Jee, guess what I'm doing? I'm doing this, super happy. Other days I'm like, hi mom, how you doing? And she's so nasty and has nothing. And I've tried so many different ways of changing my voice, calling at different times, making sure it's on her good, whatever I think her good day might be. And it's nothing to do with that. Her response has everything to do with how I've behaved to somebody else, probably not her, probably someone else that has, you know, increased in size because like seeds, karmas are seeds, just like any seed, they also increase in size. And so that seed that I planted grew, and my mother is just a terrible nightmare to me on that day. Okay. So that's how that cycle works. When you're in situations where you realize that you do know that the world is coming from you believe that, and you're in the process of trying to shift that, you have to just be patient. It's a patience thing. It's a patient thing. It's um, it's renunciation. That's a big thing for me. I think that renunciation changes the landscape very quickly. And so it's also a question of how much are you renunciating? That would be my input. You know, this idea of renunciation is a very important and vital if you want to have a Buddhist practice. And it's basically just realizing that, you know, the worldly things that the worldly things that you see in this lifetime aren't going to satisfy and bring you happiness. It's, you can never have money, you know, or enough sex or enough drugs to bring you ultimate happiness to the end. It's just not going to happen, you know. So not that I'm saying you renunciate from sex, love, and drugs, but I'm just saying there aren't those things. The world, the worldly things in life will never. It always ends in suffering, right? At some point, you get sick and you die, or you run out of money, or actually, you just never have enough money and you just want more. And so, there's a process, I think, with this practice when you do realize that and you do believe that it does come from you. To me, renunciation is always a big part. Like, that's what happens to be a big part of practice for me. How do you continue to renunciate, and how do you do it deeper? Because there are these action plans that we have, like do the 4 steps, think about this, keep a journal, keep it great. You have to continue that. That's almost the same, you know, you have to put in that effort. But if renunciation isn't something that is going deeper, perhaps that's an area to look at. Yes.
So I'm listening and I'm having these like anxieties, which is I've been having them, but like I'm not sure. Like I have fear that I will never be able to. There's like so much to be learned, and like the capacity for me to really like understand and change. And it feels like very like, what do I do with all this information? I need some um, guidance in that sense. Like if you can just like,
Yeah. So this information, I feel like the deeper you go, the more it's okay. It's okay. Um, the deeper you go, the more overwhelming it gets. So perhaps that's one good way to look at it. that that um, that you're starting to see the vastness of it because your practice is also becoming deeper. Um, Other ways to look at the practice too is it's just a daily practice. You know, I mean, really, it's a lot of information. I will also say if you're not getting all of it and absorbing all of it, that's okay. It's just you're not, it's because you're not ready for all of it. And you will be at some point. And you will learn it again and it will make more sense. And you'll learn it again and it will make more sense. And in the meantime, it's really about how are you having a consistent daily practice because it will change. It changes. And I say that because I remember I have a couple of books that Professor Bob Thurman gave me years ago, and it was so it was nice that he gave them to me. He wrote me this little note and gave them to me, and he wrote the books and said, "I think this would be a great book for you to read. It will help you." Blah 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 blah. I've had it for years, and I could never get past the first 2 pages. Actually, I had no idea what it was saying. I couldn't even understand the information because it was so dense the way he writes, and he's very academic. And it was almost, I think, my last my last retreat. So 9 years later, after practicing, I remember I took one of his books in with me to retreat, and I opened it and I was able to read it, and I totally understood all that information. And it just My karma changed. It just changes. You just put in the work and it will shift. That's what happens. It takes time. It's patience. It's difficult too when there is an attachment to wanting it so badly to be something or to look like something. The funny thing about spiritual practice is that it doesn't look like anything you think it's going to be. It doesn't hit you the way you think it's going to. It's actually much more magical than that. It doesn't look like stuff that you've read or watched on TV or other people's practice, even. It looks significantly different for yourself. Your teachers might look totally different than someone else's. My teachers look totally different than other people's teachers. My practice is very different than anyone else's practice. And the way in which I came into Buddhism is very different than most people that I know, and that's okay. And so it starts to form like my Sangha, my Buddhist brothers and sisters also look very different. They just don't have the same, it's different. So it's also not being too attached to like, I'm a practitioner, I need to have all my beads and my accoutrement and need to, it doesn't like, and need to only be on juice fast or I don't know, some weird, it doesn't need to be that way. Yes.
No, I just want to say that I really appreciate that. What you just said.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I think I know I get caught up in comparing myself.
Totally.
And what you just said about the spirituality.
Yeah.
Being a lot more natural.
Yeah, it's unique to you and it's it needs to fit into you. And there's a lot of pressures of it needing to look a certain way or memorizing things a certain way or coming to X amount of practices but that's just doing, it's because it starts to change in you. Like you start to see things differently and experience things differently. And some of that has to do with insecurities as a practitioner. Like sometimes we get nervous around other practitioners. We're like, wow, they're so advanced and I'm not. It's like, I have a lot of opinions about that. Advance in what and what does that look like? And also what is your position of how you want to be a practitioner? Like I made a very distinct choice where I decided that I'm interested, and one of the many conversations I continue having with the directors of the Three Jewels is when I teach, I have to teach in who I am in my form. So there are times where I do swear. And that's just the way I roll because that's the way I am, and I'm not any different, and I don't think, and it's also how I think about it and how I view the world and how I think I should be. And most people in my life don't even know I practice Buddhism, and you know what, it doesn't even matter because all I really need to hear from anybody is, wow, Jee's nicer this year than she was last year. Great, I'm happy with that, that's amazing, or just, you know what I mean? It doesn't need to be like, oh, I don't, it doesn't make a difference to me. But it can feel like it's a long practice. It does feel like it sometimes takes a while for things to change. I do recommend staying in it. And then I also recommend each one of you, like when you get to a point, find a teacher that makes sense for you because that also helps. For some students, you get too into, like I'm the same, and I've shared stories where I get too intense. Like I'm such a New Yorker, even in my spiritual practice, I do all of it. And I'm like trying to kill it. Like I'm trying to be awesome at it. Like I have the most amazing altar and I'm like, these are the best mala beads in the world. And I will tend to go in that direction and over practice almost rather than getting into a feeling state. Because the thing about Tibetan Buddhism is that it's so much about, it's opening your heart and feeling. It's not just a mental practice. Okay. We're going to take a break. Yeah? Okay. We'll take a 10-minute break. We'll come back. We're going to do a little bit more, then we're going to wrap up.
Some blueberries and blackberries.
Oh, yay. Amazing. Thank you. in the philosophies of the Buddha. Oh, but if you don't see the Buddha, or you don't see the things, you don't, I mean, I've never seen enlightenment or nirvana or any of that stuff. Can you take refuge? Like, can you seek refuge for something you don't see? If you don't have a valid perception of it, can you have refuge in something you don't have a valid perception in? Faith is. Sure, yeah. And you said yes. Is that the same idea?
Like, even if you don't see it, kind of like the way that for me would be like bacteria, viruses.
Yes.
You don't see them,
Yeah.
but they're there.
They're so there. Oh my God.
They're so there.
Yeah, yeah.
But you don't see them.
We're dying of the flu.
So what you're talking about makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Right. So.
Is it a valid perception if it's only in my mind? Like, does a valid perception have to be one of our senses?
Yes.
Because our senses are
yes.
what we see the world with.
Yes.
But
yeah.
The end of suffering is something intellectual,
yeah.
not sensual.
Totally. Yes, totally. So there was, historically, there is a Geshe, his name is Geshe Yeshe Wangchuk, and we're going to be using his commentaries on this subject in particular. And his main thing was the same thing. He said, how in the hell are you going to have refuge with something you don't see? How does that make sense? And so he went out and decided to figure out what that looks like. And it was really based on logic, that you can actually have perceptions that aren't direct perceptions, but it's almost valid logic, right? So it's like similar to science, where you don't see atoms, but you, through logic, right, and through tests, we know that they exist, right? And to Thomas's point, it's valid perceptions are one way in which we can actually validate and perceive things, but it's not the only way in which we can do it. There are other ways through logic that we can work through that, which is what we'll start to do in this class. And so we'll start to look at different ways of what valid logic looks like. Like I had mentioned before, the way that Tibetan Buddhists have done logic, there is a very prescribed way in which we've done it. We did it once, I think, in course 2 for a session. It was, I don't know if it was easy or not. It's a bit tricky, so we'll work on it together. The Tibetan Buddhists have always been a lineage of an oral tradition. So all the logic has been something that was always taught from generation to generation. What's happened over time that's actually been quite sad is that a lot of the lineages have lost their foundation of logic philosophy, really. So one of the lineages that have really kept it intact and managed to keep it intact are the Galupas. The Sakyas had it at one point. They were very good at it, and that started to dissipate. The Kagyus as well, that was the case, and that started to also fizzle away. So it's really, for those of you that are still here just kind of checking it out, I'm bringing this up for those of you who are really devoted and wanting to have a deeper practice, is that it's important to understand the logic, because it's something that is so incredibly precious. It's the foundation of what will give you information of how you could conceive, not direct, well, at some point directly, but how you can conceive what enlightenment could potentially look like for you, or what it could look like to change your world and revolutionize the way in which you exist. And so we're going to do this from a very logical stance and work through how to prove the nature of your life. Okay. We're going to wrap up there for now, and then we'll continue next week. Any other questions so that you don't go off the deep end while we're away for a week? Yes, so I don't have a piece of paper. Does someone have an extra sheet? Notebook? Great. If everyone can just write your email on Armando's notebook, that would be great. Yes, please, because I always renew it for each course. Another thing I would like for you to consider this week and write down. So there's three things. One, I'm going to email you a link with a Dropbox link with a bunch of goodies that you get to read and have fun with. Secondly, I will also write and email you the 4 steps so that you can do that meditation in the evening or during the day or whenever you want. And number 3, I'd like for you to consider and write down wherever you've had dilemmas of considering what valid perception means for you. Okay, does that make sense? So you'll have your day and you'll be like, or let me rephrase, write down anything that you have where you're looking at or just questioning what valid perception means to you or what it means when we talk about the world coming from you. One of those two things or both of those things. Okay, where there's conflict. So you're in your day, middle of your day, you're going to work and you're sitting there at your desk and something comes up and there's something about valid perception or about correct view that I mentioned in class that you feel like is conflicting with something that's happening in your life in that very moment. Okay. I want you to write it down for yourselves, and we're going to share it next week. We're going to start talking about how does this concept of valid perception and correct view. I'll email it to you as well. But the idea is like, how does this idea, when you start seeing the world coming from you and not at you, how does that change the way in which you see the world? And does that create conflicts for you at all? Okay.
Do you mind just repeating the structure of how you're going to change the class? Just because the microphone was off and I want to make sure that people...
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the classes will be longer. We'll probably do one for every class will be 2 sessions. So they'll be extended to 2 sessions each time and we'll do more discussions. Okay. Any questions? Everyone's good? Everyone's okay with correct view and valid perception? You think you are. Oh no is right.
Anyway. So with valid perception, talked about there are a lot of things about what matters, and I think something that I've really been struggling with is how to deal with valid perception, and I'll use an extreme example. When you're talking to a Flat Earth Society member whose valid perception is so radically different than yours, that valid perception and my valid perception are not what's debatable, right? It's like you were mentioning about how it changed the roses. The roses are here. I can't change them now. I'm stuck with them. We created that world, so I have this person there. Damn. It's just not easy.
Having that person existing?
Yeah.
Totally.
With it. And this is a really extreme example.
Yeah.
But I think starting with the extreme example makes it easier to narrow it down to the more subtle differences we have amongst each other. You know, and and I just thought of it, you said something about, it matters. Well, if it matters, then when you're explaining to me that the world is flat, I should just go, tell me more.
Wait, what matters that this guy is saying to you?
Yeah, just that it's a valid perception. So what? Like my valid perception, so what?
Totally. It is so what? No, you're right. It is so what?
It really is that thing that's making concrete our
our world is, yeah.
It gives it this self-existence that it
Uh-huh.
doesn't really have.
Mm-hmm. So what?
We shouldn't even be entering into arguments at that point.
Well,
Because-
arguing with that person. Yeah, so there's a couple of things that you're saying, right? So one thing is, the goal of understanding valid perception, like I said, is not to give you any type of ammo to argue. That's ridiculous. Like, it doesn't even make sense as a Buddhist teacher to be like, here's something I'm going to give you so that you can all become great debaters and argue. That's not true at all. The point of understanding valid perception is just to realize that you and all beings around you all have that happening at the same time. Why that pisses you off and why that upsets you is a whole different conversation. The first thing that needs to be understood, though, is that it's not coming at you, it's coming from you. So the conversation at that very moment when someone upsets you isn't, how am I going to change you, or how am I going to debate with you or to convince you otherwise? The question is, what do I need to do in my, where have I shown a great amount of ignorance and stubbornness in my life that I'm perceiving in this person that I done for myself? Because that's the only thing that needs to be talked about at that point, right? That's the only point. The thing about life, the more you become a practitioner, is that the things that really, like when I go see my family, I get so excited to see how much they upset me, because it's a test. The point of it isn't, it's to see, like, because before I would try to defend myself and it was a different game. Now the game is completely different. It's a question of, how much have I changed? How much have I not pissed other people off now? Because now they don't seem to piss me. Like, I try to get them to upset me. I'm in a situation with my family now where, like, so far, they're like transformed. The family that once disowned me now have come to are now in my life and can't imagine living without me. And I do so much for my family. I have a grandfather right now who's very sick, and he's on life support, and the whole family is just literally like, I have managed to change my relationship with my family, where everyone's like, Jee has to be here. Why isn't she here? What are we going to do? We can't, I mean, that's shifted, right? Something in my life has shifted. So when things of conflict happen, when that conflict arises in that moment, the key to that conflict is not that person, is the point. Like, they're the last thing that you need to be worrying about. The main point is looking at you and saying, this gives you information, it gives you data, it gives you content to consider, where are you messed up in your mind, and where can you change so that you don't see that whatever anymore. Does that make sense? That's the trick. And that's always a trick. That's where you get so screwed as a practitioner, because you get totally caught into that rabbit hole where you're suddenly like debating or changing or trying to prove that you're right. And it doesn't even matter, because that's not even the point. The point is, there's something about that person that triggered something in you, whether it's good or bad, even the good stuff. It's like, what? Yasha Michael just did a talk this weekend, and he said, it's always interesting because when someone gets sick, right, they always say, why me? Right? But when they win the lotto, no one says, why me? You're like, why me? Like, no one says that. When things are bad, it's always, why me? When things are good, it's like, oh yeah, of course, like, I deserved it. It's strange. It's not. So the thing about Buddhist logic and about Buddhist philosophy and about karma and all these different topics is that it's consistent. It's not a cherry picking. You can pick and choose when you want and apply it when you want. It doesn't work that way. So there is this idea where it's like, you should be asking, why me, all the time, the good and the bad. Of course you should be. As a philosopher, or anyone who's endeavoring, wants to endeavor in philosophy at all, should be asking why. Why is this happening? Why me? What did I do? That's a very good point. So a lot of practitioners do start to end up moving to a direction where they just, it becomes that, right? Where it's very much blaming, And it's not that, because it's not an extreme either. It's about understanding. It's about, the trick with Buddhism is that there's compassion that we have too, right? So to be punishing yourself isn't the point either. We're not Christians. Not. It's not. There is no punishment like that. You're not. You didn't sin. It's not like that. It's just understanding that there is something you're experiencing in your life that you don't like, that you have to understand that you've created that for yourself. So even in Buddhist philosophy, there isn't so much of bad and good. It's not like you're a bad person and you're a good person. It's usually in the context of morals and virtues and ethics and what feels good and what brings you joy and happiness. It's not like a bad, because lying too is not necessarily considered bad. It depends on your intent. Did you lie for a good cause or did you lie for a bad cause? Did you lie to help save someone's life? That's not the same weight as lying because you're trying to manipulate a situation. So even in karmas, they're weighted differently and they're colored differently, So it's not like that kind of thing. And if it starts to go down a path where you're just being hard on yourself, then there's practices of compassion that also come into play. Yeah. Yes. Question.
No, I was gonna say, I feel like this opens the door for empathy also.
Totally.
Because you're looking at someone that could be where you were.
Totally.
And they're gonna be receiving something that maybe now you're aware.
Totally.
So you step away from it.
Yeah.
Because you don't want karma.
Of course. It really does. It naturally opens up that way, for sure, where you have at least a little bit more empathy or compassion because you have some sort of self-awareness to realize maybe you're not ignorant just as much as they are, but you understand where their ignorance comes from, right? Or you understand where their bad behavior comes from. Or you have, you just get it. You're like, I get it. I had a bad day too. And I, blew a fuse at work and I totally shouldn't have, or I snapped at somebody or hung up the phone or whatever, right? Or I didn't even, or just like even on the subway, like I tend to I have a limited awareness with my surrounding in general. I'll admit it. I'm not the first to admit it. My husband's the first to admit it. I'm the second to admit it. But I just do, and every time I get bumped on the subway, I can't even get upset anymore because I'm like, I don't know. There are times I put on coats and I'm like literally flailing and hitting somebody. I have no idea. And someone behind me says, hello. And I'm like, oh, I'm so, And so it's a reminder of how I need to be more aware with my surrounding. And that's not just in the subway. It might be in my home, or it might be when I go visit someone else's home or my parents' home. Like, just don't throw your stuff around and act like that's okay. So it manifests in these subtle ways, and it creates a constant place of self-awareness because you're always asking yourself when you don't like things that are going on, why is that happening? And where did I exhibit an aspect of that in my life before? And, or even more proactively, things that you see in your life and you're like, I don't want to see that anymore happen in my life. How do I create a level of abundance or patience or consideration or understanding or kindness, right? Or generosity, all these different things. And how do I act on that way so that that person leaves me forever, or that aspect changes because they can change too, And it is like what you said. You said when you see somebody, you said an aspect of yourself. You are literally seeing yourself. You're totally seeing that. And that's a hard thing for us to all realize. Because when you're especially in situations with someone that brings so much fury and anger or frustration, or even sadness, right? You think, how can I possibly be the same as that person? Like every time I see Trump, really, it's like, how am I possibly that person? I can't reconcile it. I'll just be like, I need to turn on, done. I can't. Sometimes I just need time, right? But it makes me understand that also as a practitioner, it's like, well, I don't agree with him, but I do know that he's human, And there are certain levels of compassion that I have to have, and I understand. And it doesn't mean you have to like them, and it doesn't mean you have to agree with them, you know? Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay.
Sashi
Puki Jushin Mito Tram Rira Lishi Ninde Kepadi Sange Shindu Mikte Uargi Roku Nanda Shimla Duparsho Yam Guru Ratnamanda Kamir Dayami Di Gewoku Sunam Yeshe Suksokshi Sunam Yeshe Manjumwe Dampa Guni Dupar Show. Just spend a couple of minutes in a meditation pose. And we're just going to do a quick rejoice and dedication. So I just want you to close your eyes, take a deep breath through your nose, in and out. And this may sound silly, but simply acknowledge the fact that you're here tonight and commend yourself. You don't need to go crazy, but just acknowledge and commend. Because you could have been home or somewhere else and you decided to come here for whatever reason that is. And whatever reason that is, take a moment and dedicate that to one person in the world who you think would benefit. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Of course. So I'll send out an email. I also do what I call Dharma dates. So they're coffee dates, usually before class. So if you want to book a session, let me know. I usually do 30 minutes, but it's really an hour. So we'll do an hour session. But feel free to email me. And usually they're just, I don't know, they're not a structure. It's just hanging out, getting a sense of who you are. You can get a sense of more who I am. If there's any questions you have that you're too nervous to ask in class, that's a good time to ask. Anything. It's pretty relaxed. It's just us hanging out, having coffee one-on-one. Okay? Nice. Of course. Good to see everyone.